Mr. Sanford, in order for me to know what I have to know so I can get down to business, you will have to open.
Well, until I know what I have to know, the business stays closed.
For millions, it was the funniest show on television, a half hour of pure joy from a junkyard in Watts. But behind the laughter of Sanford and Son was a world of pain, betrayal, and secrets kept hidden for over 50 years. The on-screen family was torn apart by real-life feuds, and the show's most famous joke ended in a tragedy no one saw coming. What really happened when the cameras stopped rolling? The truth is more shocking than you can imagine. Secret 1. Before Fred and Lamont Sanford ever entered our living rooms, their story belonged to two white junk dealers in London. The show was based on a British sitcom called Steptoe and Son, which was a huge hit in the United Kingdom. American producers saw its success and wanted to bring it to the United States. Their first attempt was in 1965. They made a pilot episode starring two white actors, Lee Tracy and Alda Ray, but it was a complete failure and was never even shown on TV. Years went by, and the idea was still floating around Hollywood. Famed producer Norman Lear decided to give it another shot. He hired two more white actors, Bernard Hughes and Paul Sorvino, and filmed another pilot. But just like the first one, it was considered a failure and was locked away, never to be seen by the public. The project seemed cursed. The concept of two bickering junk dealers just wasn't working for American audiences. With two failed pilots, the idea was on the verge of being thrown away forever. It was only then, as a last resort, that producers made a decision that would change television history. This leads to a startling truth about the show's identity. The idea to make the characters black was not some grand progressive plan. In fact, when the original British writers suggested an all-black cast years earlier, American producers told them it was impossible. They said networks would never show a series about poor black people unless they were doctors or lawyers. It was only after every other option had failed that Norman Lear, in a final desperate attempt to save the show, decided to try casting black actors. The groundbreaking series that became a cornerstone of black culture was born not from a vision, but from the ashes of failure. Secret 2. When it came time to cast the new black version of the show, Norman Lear made a choice that shocked everyone. He picked a comedian named Red Fox. Today, we know him as the lovable, grumpy Fred Sanford. But in the early 1970s, Red Fox was known for something very different. He was the king of party records, a type of comedy album so dirty they could never be played on the radio. His jokes were shocking, his language was profane, and his nightclub act was strictly for adults only. Quincy Jones, the music legend who was hired to write the theme song, was completely baffled. He had known Red for years and couldn't believe that NBC would put a man with such a filthy mouth on primetime television. Casting Red Fox was a massive gamble. But Norman Lear saw something special in him, a raw, authentic humor that could make Fred Sanford feel real. This gamble, however, came with a hidden cost. Red's background as a blue comedian was a double-edged sword. On one hand, his decades of performing on the Chitlin circuit for black audiences gave him a perfect sense of timing and an understanding of what was genuinely funny. But on the other hand, it put him on a collision course with the show's writers, who were almost all white. Red would often get a script and refuse to say the lines. He would famously tell the writers, "Black people don't talk like that." These weren't just disagreements, they were heated battles. Red knew the world of Watts, and he refused to perform a fake version of it written by people who had never lived it. This constant fight for authenticity would create deep tensions that simmered just beneath the surface of every funny scene. Secret 3. Playing Fred's long-suffering son, Lamont, was a young actor named Demond Wilson. On screen, he was the calm, reasonable one, always trying to rein in his father's crazy schemes. But in his real life, Demond was carrying a secret that was anything but calm. Before he ever set foot in that TV junkyard, Demond Wilson was a soldier in the United States Army. He served in the 4th Infantry Division during the Vietnam War, one of the most brutal conflicts in American history. During his service from 1966 to 1968, he was wounded in combat and received the Purple Heart for his sacrifice. He returned home a decorated veteran, but the war left scars that no one could see. He later admitted that for years he battled undiagnosed PTSD and a violent rage that he struggled to control. This hidden trauma was a world away from the easygoing character he played on TV. This history of survival created an unexpected bridge between him and his co-star. Red Fox's early life was its own kind of war zone. He grew up in extreme poverty, hopping freight trains as a teenager and sometimes resorting to petty crime just to eat. Both men, in their own ways, were survivors who had seen the toughest sides of life. One had survived the streets of Harlem, the other had survived the jungles of Vietnam. This shared foundation of toughness and resilience likely fueled their incredible on-screen chemistry. Secret 4. Red Fox poured his own life into the show in ways that audiences never knew. The names of the characters were not chosen at random. They were secret tributes to the most important people in his life. The character of Lamont was named after Lamont Ousley, one of Red's closest friends from his childhood when they played in a washtub band together. Fred's friend Grady Wilson was named as a nod to Demond Wilson, whose full name is Grady Demond Wilson. But the most meaningful tribute was hidden in Fred's own name. Fred G. Sanford was named after Red's real-life older brother, Fred Glenn Sanford Jr., who had passed away just a few years before the show started. Red's father had abandoned his family when he was just a little boy, so his brother Fred was one of the most important figures in his life. By giving his character his brother's name, Red was keeping his memory alive every single week in front of millions of people. Secret 5. One of the most surprising facts about Red Fox is that he was much younger than the character he played. When Sanford and Son began, Red was only 49 years old, but he was playing Fred Sanford, who was supposed to be 65. He had to wear makeup to add wrinkles and age to his face. But for Red, the real transformation had nothing to do with makeup. He said that he never truly felt like Fred Sanford until he put on one specific part of his costume: the big, heavy work shoes. As soon as he laced up those boots, everything changed. He said the shoes changed the way he walked, giving him the slow, shuffling gait of an older man. They changed the way he stood, and even the way he thought. For Red, stepping into Fred's shoes was literally how he became the character. Secret 6. It's hard to imagine Sanford and Son without the Bible-toting, purse-swinging Aunt Esther. Her battles with Fred were legendary. But the actress who played her, LaWanda Page, was almost fired after her very first day on set. LaWanda and Red Fox had been friends since they were children in St. Louis, and Red personally brought her in for the role. However, LaWanda had very little experience acting on television, and during her first rehearsal, the producers were not impressed. They felt her performance was weak, and they made the decision to fire her and find another actress. When Red heard the news, he was furious. He went straight to the producers and gave them an ultimatum. He told them that LaWanda Page was his friend, and if she was going, he was going too. He threatened to walk off the #1 show on television if they fired her. The producers had no choice but to back down. Red's fierce loyalty saved his friend's job, and LaWanda Page went on to create one of the most iconic and beloved characters in sitcom history. Secret 7. On the show, Lamont's best friend was the smooth-talking Rollo Lawson, played by Nathaniel Taylor. They were always together, getting into and out of trouble. Their friendship seemed completely natural and real. But off-screen, it was a very different story. Demond Wilson later revealed a shocking secret. He and Nathaniel Taylor did not get along at all. In fact, Wilson said that Taylor actively disliked him. There was a hidden tension between the two actors whenever the cameras weren't rolling. despite this personal animosity, they were professionals who were able to put their differences aside and create a believable friendship for the show. In a surprising admission, Wilson also said that he and Taylor were often high during filming, which he suggested may have helped to keep things from getting too heated on set. Secret 8. Redd Foxx was deeply committed to making the character of Fred Sanford feel as authentic as possible. He wanted every detail to be perfect, right down to the music Fred listened to. Redd himself was a huge fan of a 1930s singing group called the Ink Spots, and he loved to have Fred sing their songs on the show. There was just one problem. The rights to use those classic songs were very expensive, and the network, NBC, refused to pay for them. But Redd wouldn't take no for an answer. He believed the music was essential to the character. So he did something almost unheard of for a TV star. He reached into his own wallet and paid the expensive licensing fees himself. It was a testament to his dedication and showed that he was willing to invest his own money to protect his artistic vision for the show. Secret 9. The opening theme of Sanford and Son, a funky, gritty tune called The Street Beater, is one of the most recognizable TV themes of all time. It was composed by the legendary Quincy Jones, but he almost turned the job down. When he was first approached, Jones was very skeptical about the show. He knew Redd Foxx from the nightclub scene and was well aware of his profane comedy act. He couldn't understand how NBC was going to build a family sitcom around such a controversial figure. But he took the job, and when it came time to write the music, he found a unique inspiration. He said he didn't write a song about the show's plot or its jokes. Instead, he said, "I just wrote what he looked like." He felt that the music perfectly captured the swagger and attitude of Fred Sanford. He once said, "It sounds just like him, doesn't it?" Secret 10. Almost as famous as Fred and Lamont was their trusty beat-up red truck. The 1951 Ford F1 pickup was a character in itself, always parked in front of the junkyard. For decades after the show ended, the truck's fate was a mystery. It seemed to have vanished. Years later, the original truck from the show was finally found and authenticated. It is now owned by a classic car dealership in Ohio, preserved as a piece of television history. What many fans don't know is that the truck was a uniquely American addition to the story. In the original British show, Steptoe and Son, the characters didn't have a truck at all. They were rag and bone men who collected junk using a horse and a wooden cart. Secret 11. By its third season, Sanford and Son was one of the biggest hits on television, and Redd Foxx knew he was the reason why. He felt that he wasn't being paid what he was worth, and he decided to do something about it. In the middle of the 1973 to 1974 season, Redd Foxx walked off the set and refused to come back. He told the press he was leaving due to health issues, but the real reason was money. He was earning $19,000 per episode, a huge amount at the time, but he wanted more. He demanded a massive pay raise and, more importantly, a 25% ownership stake in the entire series. The producers at Tandem Productions were stunned and angry. They responded by filing a $10 million lawsuit against their own star. The show was thrown into chaos. Production stopped, and for a while, it seemed like Sanford and Son might be over for good. Eventually, the dispute was settled. Redd got a raise to $25,000 per episode and a percentage of the show's profits, but the battle left a bitter taste and was a sign of the bigger fights to come. Secret 12. With Redd Foxx gone, the producers were in a panic. How could they have Sanford and Son without Sanford? They decided to write Fred out of the show temporarily. For 6 straight episodes, the story was that Fred was away in St. Louis attending a family funeral. Suddenly, Demond Wilson, who had always been the co-star, was forced to become the main character and carry the entire show on his shoulders. To help fill the void left by Redd, the writers had Fred's friend Grady, played by Whitman Mayo, move into the house to keep an eye on Lamont. It was a strange and difficult time for the series. The dynamic was completely different, and while Demon did his best, it was clear to everyone that the magic of the show was the chemistry between father and son. Those 6 episodes proved that the show simply wasn't the same without Fred. Secret 13. Red Fox eventually returned to the show, and for a few more years, things seemed to go back to normal. But in 1977, the partnership that had defined the series came to a sudden and heartbreaking end. Red received a massive offer from the rival network ABC to host his own variety show, and he took it. His decision to leave meant that Sanford and Son was officially over. But the way he left shattered his friendship with Demon Wilson. Red never told Demon he was leaving. There was no conversation, no goodbye. Demon found out that the show was ending and his partner was leaving not from his friend of 6 years, but from a newscaster who stopped him in a hallway at NBC Studios. For Demon, it was a profound betrayal. He later said that he wasn't angry that Red left for a better opportunity. What hurt him was the silence. He said, "I forgave him and I loved Red, but I never forgot that." The pain of this moment was so deep that it seemed to color Demon's memory for years. In one interview, he said that he only saw Red one more time, in 1983, and described the meeting as cold, saying Red was less than affable. But in another interview, he described that very same meeting very differently, saying, "We hugged, we cried, and we kissed." Secret 14. A few years later, in 1980, Red Fox's new show on ABC had failed, and he wanted to go back to the character that made him a star. NBC agreed to bring back the Junkman in a new series called Sanford. The plan was to reunite Fred and Lamont and recapture the old magic. But when the producers called Demon Wilson and asked him to return, he gave them a firm no. The wound from Red's departure was still too fresh. He had moved on and had no interest in going back. His refusal was the final official end of their professional partnership. It proved that some things, once broken, could never be put back together again. Secret 15. The network and producers tried desperately to keep the Sanford and Son universe alive, but every attempt ended in disaster. They tried to spin off Fred's friend Grady into his own show in 1975, but it was canceled after just a few months. Viewers loved Grady as a side character, but he couldn't carry a show on his own. After Red and Demon left in 1977, NBC made one last desperate attempt to continue the show without them. They created a new series called The Sanford Arms, which focused on the supporting characters like Aunt Esther and Bubba, who were still living next door. It was a catastrophe. Without Fred and Lamont, the show felt empty and pointless. It was canceled after only 4 episodes had aired. Finally, there was the 1980 revival, Sanford, which failed because Fred without Lamont was only half of the story. These failures all pointed to one undeniable truth. The success of Sanford and Son was never about the junkyard, the jokes, or the side characters. It was about the unique, irreplaceable chemistry between Red Fox and Demon Wilson. Once that was gone, the magic was gone forever. Secret 16. Fred Sanford was known for being a cheap, grumpy old man who was always looking for a way to make a quick buck. But Red Fox, the man who played him, had a reputation for being the exact opposite. He was known for his incredible generosity, especially to other performers who were struggling. Pat Morita, the actor who played Lamont's friend Ah Chu and later became famous as Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, told a story that showed Red's true character. Early in his career, Morita and his wife were trying to buy their first house, but they were $3,500 short on the down payment. He was telling Red about his problem when Red simply pulled out his checkbook and wrote him a check for the full amount. When Morita tried to promise he would pay him back, Red stopped him. He said, "I don't want to hear about no papers, no payback. You do this for somebody." It was a lesson in kindness that Pat Morita never forgot, and years later, he paid that generosity forward by helping a young, struggling comedian named Robin Williams. Secret 17. Red Fox made millions of dollars in his career, but he lived a lavish lifestyle and had problems with money management. By the late 1980s, his financial problems had caught up to him in the worst way possible. He owed the IRS a massive amount of money in back taxes, nearly $1 million. In 1989, federal agents raided his home in Las Vegas to seize his property. It was a public and humiliating event. News cameras filmed as agents carried everything out of his house: his 7 cars, his furniture, his records, and his jewelry. They even took the cash out of his pockets. An iconic photo from that day shows Red Fox, one of the biggest television stars of the 70s, standing outside his empty home in his underwear, watching his life get carried away. When the agents left, all he had left in the world was his bed. Secret 18. Fred Sanford's most famous catchphrase was also his go-to move in any argument. Whenever he wanted to get his way, he would grab his chest, look up to the sky, and yell, "Elizabeth, I'm coming to join you." It was his fake heart attack, the big one, and it was one of the most famous running jokes in television history. In 1991, Red Fox was attempting a comeback. He was starring in a new sitcom called The Royal Family alongside his old friend, Della Reese. The show was a hit, and it seemed like Red was finally back on top. But on October 11th, 1991, during a rehearsal on set, the joke that made him famous became a horrifying reality. Red Fox suffered a massive and very real heart attack. Secret 19. When Red grabbed his chest and collapsed to the floor, the cast and crew of the royal family didn't panic at first. They thought he was joking. They assumed he was just doing his classic "I'm coming, Elizabeth" routine to make everyone laugh. For a few crucial moments, everyone stood there, smiling, waiting for the punchline. But the punchline never came. By the time they realized this wasn't an act, it was too late. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, but there was nothing they could do. Red Fox was pronounced dead a few hours later. In a final, tragic twist of irony, the comedy bit that had brought laughter to millions ended up delaying the help that could have saved his life. Secret 20. The story of Red's death gets even more disturbing. His co-star and dear friend, Della Reese, was with him at the hospital when he passed away. She later recounted a chilling story about what happened in the moments after the doctor delivered the terrible news. According to Della, 2 of the show's producers were also at the hospital. As soon as the doctor said that Red was gone, she overheard one producer turn to the other and ask, "What are we going to do with the script?" The other replied, "Now who is going to get to do Fox's lines?" Della was so disgusted by their cold, heartless reaction that she stormed out of the hospital and vowed she would never work on a show like that again. It was a shocking look into the brutal nature of the entertainment business. Secret 21. Red Fox died the same way he started his life, completely broke. After the IRS raid, he had nothing left. The man who had once been a king of television didn't even have enough money for his own burial. When the comedian Eddie Murphy heard this, he quietly stepped in. Eddie had always considered Red Fox one of his heroes and had cast him in his movie Harlem Nights a few years earlier. To make sure his idol was given a dignified farewell, Eddie Murphy secretly paid for Red Fox's entire funeral. Secret 22. While Red Fox's final years were filled with financial ruin and tragedy, Demond Wilson's life took a very different path. After a few more acting jobs in the early 1980s, he made a decision that surprised everyone. He walked away from Hollywood and left his acting career behind. He decided to fulfill a promise he had made to God when he was just a boy and had a near-death experience. Demond Wilson became an ordained minister. Instead of chasing fame, he dedicated his life to his faith and to helping others. He founded an organization called Restoration House of America, which works to help former prison inmates get back on their feet. The man who played the son found a quiet life of purpose and peace, a world away from the spotlight that had consumed his on-screen father. The laughter from 9114 South Central Avenue still echoes today, a testament to the genius of two men who felt more like family than actors. But behind that laughter was a story of deep love, fierce loyalty, and heartbreaking betrayal. Sanford and Son was more than just a sitcom. It was a fragile world built on a real friendship, and when that friendship broke, the laughter fell silent forever, leaving behind a legacy that is both hilarious and tragic.